At Thanksgiving, my dad announced he was selling the family business and I'd get nothing. My siblings cheered. I asked one question: who's the buyer? When he said the name, I put down my fork and said, Dad, that's me. My father announced he was cutting me out of the family business on a Thursday, between the cranberry sauce and the pecan pie, with the specific satisfied confidence of a man who has been rehearsing a speech and is finally pleased with his delivery. He stood at the head of the table like he always stood, back straight, chin up, the posture of a man who has confused his dining room for a boardroom for so long that the confusion has become permanent. He tapped his crystal glass with a butter knife. He waited for the room to settle. I've decided to sell Adam's software, he said. The deal closes tomorrow, and the proceeds will not be going to you children. My brother Garrett slammed the table hard enough to rattle the gravy boat. That's our birthright! My sister Megan burst into tears on camera. And I do mean on camera, because Megan was live streaming Thanksgiving dinner for her 47,000 Instagram followers and had been adjusting her phone angle for the best light since we sat down. I took a quiet bite of pecan pie. Then I set my fork down, looked up the length of 30 years of mahogany and family dinners and holiday performances, and asked the only question that mattered. Just one question, Dad. Who's the buyer? He smiled, the specific smile of a man about to prove something. Everest Holdings, he said, puffing up the way he always puffed up when he had information he considered impressive. Run by a brilliant woman named Emmy Stone. $50 million, more than fair. I looked at him for a moment. Dad, I said, Emmy Stone is me. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. Nobody breathed. I'm Everest Holdings. I've been building it for 10 years, and for the past 18 months, I've also been quietly acquiring controlling stakes in your 3 largest suppliers and your 2 most significant clients. My father's face moved through confusion, disbelief, and rage in approximately 4 seconds. The fastest I had ever watched a man reassemble himself into anger, because anger was the only shape that felt safe. This deal is off, he snapped. I won't sell to my own daughter. You already did, Dad, I said, legally, last Tuesday. And then I reached into my bag and slid a business card across the mahogany table he had carved turkey on for 30 years. Morgan Adams, CEO, Everest Holdings. He stared at it like it was something that had crawled in from outside. You told me I wasn't built for the real world, I said. You were right, so I built my own. His phone rang before he could find an answer. He looked at the screen. His lawyer. His hand was shaking when he picked it up. I watched him listen. I watched the last color leave his face. Sir, his lawyer said. I could hear it from across the table. The acquisition just cleared federal review. It's done. Done. 10 years. One word. Done. Let me take you back to where this actually started, because the Thanksgiving table was the ending. The beginning was a boardroom, and a 22-year-old with a MIT degree and a presentation she had spent 4 months building, and a father who laughed. My name is Morgan Elizabeth Adams. I am 32 years old. For the past decade, the technology industry has known me as Emmy Stone. The E for Elizabeth, the Stone, because it's what I decided to become. I run Everest Holdings, a cloud integration and enterprise software firm headquartered in San Francisco, currently valued at approximately $340 million, with offices in Boston, Austin, and London. My father has always introduced me at parties as his daughter, who does something with computers in California. He has been telling people this for 10 years. He meant it as a diminishment. He had no idea it was technically accurate. Let me tell you about Richard Adams, because he is the architecture around which everything else was built. My father founded Adams Software in 1991 with a second mortgage and a genuine instinct for enterprise solutions that was, in its time, remarkable. He built something real. I want to be clear about that. In the beginning, he built something real, something that worked, and I was proud of him for it in the uncomplicated way that children are proud of their parents before they understand the full picture. The full picture. My father was brilliant at building things and constitutionally incapable of believing that anyone else, especially anyone female, and most especially his own daughter, could build something he hadn't sanctioned. Garrett, my younger brother by 3 years, was the crown prince. Loud, charming, aggressively average, and completely certain of his own genius in the way that mediocre men so often are when the world has never once required them to verify the claim. He had been groomed for the boardroom since he was 14. His ideas received funding. His mistakes received patience. His presence at the company was treated as a gift the company was lucky to receive. I was the daughter. I graduated from MIT with a degree in computer science and a cloud integration platform I had been developing for 2 years, a system that would have genuinely modernized Adams Software's entire operational infrastructure, saved them an estimated $4 million annually in redundancies, and positioned them competitively against the enterprise solutions that were already beginning to eat their their market share. I had built the full presentation, slides, data, a 3-year implementation roadmap, a financial model that I had reviewed by Professor David Lehman, my thesis advisor at MIT, 26 years in enterprise technology systems, who called it one of the most practically sophisticated frameworks I've reviewed from a recent graduate. I stood up in my father's boardroom on a Tuesday in October. I was 22 years old in a blazer I had bought specifically for this meeting. I had rehearsed for 2 weeks. My father stopped me 10 minutes in. "That's very creative, sweetheart," he said, without looking up from his phone. Then he turned to his board, 6 men, average age 61, collectively holding more institutional authority than professional competence, and made a small, dismissive gesture in my direction. "My daughter just graduated. Very academic ideas." They laughed. Not cruelly, which would have been easier to carry. They laughed the way men laugh at something that is simply not relevant to the conversation they are actually having, as if I were a child who had wandered into the room and said something precocious. Then they moved on. I sat in that boardroom for another 40 minutes. I listened to them discuss a vendor contract. I watched Garrett present a Q3 sales summary that contained 2 arithmetic errors I could see from across the table and which no one corrected. That night, I went home to my childhood bedroom and packed one bag. I had $5,000 in savings. I booked a one-way flight to San Francisco for the following morning. I left a note on the kitchen table that said, "Gone to figure things out. Will call when I'm settled." My father texted 3 days later, "Let me know if you need anything." He did not ask what my plan was. He did not ask why I'd left. I think on some level, he assumed I'd be back within the year, chastened and grateful, ready to take a junior administrative position and stop pretending I had ideas worth hearing. That assumption is, I will admit, the single most expensive mistake he ever made. San Francisco in January is gray and cold and smells like salt and coffee, and the specific ambitious energy of people who have decided the old rules don't apply to them. I found a studio apartment in the Mission for $1,400 a month. I bought a secondhand desk and a good monitor. I opened my laptop. I registered a company under the name Everest Holdings LLC on January 19th. The name I put on the registration was Emmy Stone. Not to hide from my family initially, I just wanted, for once in my life, to build something that had nothing to do with the Adams name. Something that would stand or fall entirely on its own merits. Something that couldn't be explained away as a family favor or a legacy position or a daughter playing at business. I wanted to find out what I could actually do. The first year was what anyone who has built something from scratch in their 20s will recognize: long, grinding, frequently terrifying, occasionally exhilarating, and characterized by a specific kind of loneliness that comes from working in isolation toward a goal that exists primarily inside your own head. I lived on ramen and black coffee and the knowledge that my platform worked. I knew it worked because I kept testing it, refining it, running it against real enterprise scenarios, and it kept performing. That knowledge was the only fixed point in a landscape that was otherwise entirely uncertain. I brought on my first client in month 7, a mid-sized logistics firm in Oakland that was hemorrhaging money on legacy infrastructure. I charged them $8,000 for a 6-month implementation contract. I did the work myself, across 16-hour days, and delivered results that their operations director, a woman named Sandra Chu with 20 years in supply chain, called the most substantive technology upgrade we've had in a decade. Sandra became my first reference. Sandra's LinkedIn post about our work together became my first marketing. By year 2, I had 4 employees and a waiting list. By year 3, I had 10 employees, 3 enterprise contracts, and my first Series A funding, $4. $2 million from a venture firm in Palo Alto, whose managing partner, Thomas Heller, had 31 years in enterprise technology investment and called our integration architecture the most elegant solution to a genuinely complicated problem I've seen in 5 years of looking. Thomas is on my board now. He still uses those words. I called my father periodically during these years. Casual calls, Sunday evenings mostly. "How are things going out there?" he'd ask. "Good," I'd say. "Still figuring things out." "Well, if you ever want to come home, thanks, Dad. I'll let you know." I let him believe what he needed to believe. This was a choice I made consciously, and I want to be honest about why. Not cruelty, not a long game of revenge, but a simpler and more personal motive. I needed to know that what I was building was real before I held it up to anyone's scrutiny. I needed the proof to exist before I offered it to a man who had dismissed the promise. The 18-month acquisition strategy was different. That was intentional. That was surgical. It started when I heard, through a contact at a Boston area tech conference, that Adams Software was struggling. Their enterprise clients were migrating to more modern platforms. Their development team was understaffed and under-resourced. Their infrastructure was exactly the kind of legacy system that my integration platform had been designed, originally, to modernize. My father had not modernized it. He had instead spent 3 years making incremental adjustments and cutting the development budget to protect his margins ends, which is what happens when a man who is good at building things stops trusting the people around him who might know how to grow them. I hired Nathan Pelle, 12 years in corporate M&A, formerly with Goldman Sachs, a man with the specific, methodical patience of someone who understands that acquisitions are assembled like buildings. Foundation first, then structure, then the details that everyone sees. Nathan is currently our VP of Strategic Development and the most valuable hire I have ever made. This is doable, Nathan said when I walked him through the strategy. 18 months if we're patient. The supply chain is the key. 3 suppliers representing roughly 60% of their operational dependencies. If we own those, we own their leverage. I don't want to destroy the company, I told him. I want to own it. There's a difference. Understood, he said. We'll do this clean. We did it clean. Every acquisition was standard market transaction. Fair price, proper documentation, full disclosure to the relevant parties. None of the suppliers knew they were selling to a company that was simultaneously building a position around their primary client. That's not deception. That's due diligence. That's how every major acquisition in the history of enterprise technology has been structured by people who had the foresight to think 18 moves ahead. By September, we had controlling positions in 2 of Atom Software's 3 primary suppliers and one of their 2 largest clients. By November, we had the 3rd supplier. By the 3rd Tuesday of November, Atom Software's board, which did not include Garrett, who had a board seat in title only, and who I knew from Nathan's due diligence, had been using the company's vendor payment system to route approximately $300,000 to shell accounts over the past 3 years, had voted to accept our acquisition offer, $50 million. A fair price for a company in the position Atom Software was in. Generous, even, given what we knew about the vendor irregularities. The deal was signed on a Tuesday. The press release was scheduled for 9 a.m. Friday. My flight to Boston left Wednesday evening. I told my father I was coming home for Thanksgiving. He seemed pleased. I landed at Logan at 11:40 p.m. on a Gulfstream G550 that I had chartered because I was tired and had earned it, and because, I'll be honest with you, because I wanted the arrival to be the thing it was, and not something I had to apologize for. My assistant, Priya Mehta, had booked me into a suite at the Four Seasons in downtown Boston. Priya is 27 and has a degree in business administration from Boston University, and the organizational precision of someone who has never once in her professional life allowed anything to happen by accident. She had also, per my instructions, arranged for a copy of the finalized acquisition documents, countersigned, federally reviewed, legally complete, to be waiting in my room in a sealed folder. I opened the folder at midnight and read through it one final time. It was done. All of it. I ordered room service. I slept for 7 hours. I woke up on Thanksgiving morning and put on the outfit I'd specifically chosen. A cashmere sweater, good trousers, nothing performative. And I drove myself to my father's house in a rented Tesla Model S because I thought the irony was warranted. The house looked the same. It always looked the same. Big Georgian colonial manicured lawn, the Addams family flag my father had actually commissioned flying from the porch. Inside, it smelled like turkey and the specific warmth of a house that has been preparing for company all day. Garrett was in the driveway when I pulled up, admiring his new boat, which he was apparently discussing with a neighbor despite the fact that the boat was in a marina 40 miles away. So what he was actually doing was talking about the boat. And he gave me the look he always gave me, which was the look of a man who has always been slightly uncertain of his authority over a specific person and has spent years compensating for that uncertainty with volume. Morgan, he said. Didn't know you were coming. Dad invited me, I said. Right. He looked at the Tesla. Nice rental. Thanks, I said and went inside. Megan was in the kitchen, phone propped against the stand mixer, filming herself helping with the cranberry sauce in the specific way that meant she was performing proximity to the cranberry sauce without actually touching it. Megan has 47,000 Instagram followers and a lifestyle brand called Megan Authentic, which is not an irony she has ever registered. Oh my God, Morgan! She hugged me for the camera. You look amazing. What are you doing with your hair? Nothing different, I said. It's so effortless, she said, which was Megan's way of saying she didn't know how to categorize me and had chosen to classify me as accidentally acceptable rather than intentionally put together. I helped set the table. I made conversation with Garrett's girlfriend Amber, who was pleasant and laughed at things slightly too readily and was, I suspected, smarter than she was letting on in this particular room. I ate a bread roll. I watched my father preside over the kitchen with the satisfied authority of a man who is about to deliver news he considers magnificent. I knew what the news was. I had known for 3 weeks. I waited. He tapped his glass at 1:47 p.m. He stood. He delivered his announcement. He watched Garrett slam the table. He watched Megan cry into her phone. He watched me eat a bite of pecan pie. And then I asked him who the buyer was. And he told me. And the rest of it you already know. What you don't know, what I haven't told you yet, is what happened in the 45 minutes after his lawyer's phone call. The room erupted the moment I confirmed the acquisition was complete. My father's voice at volume was a specific and familiar experience. Not frightening exactly, the way it had been when I was younger, but carrying the ghost of that old fear, the residue of years spent navigating the specific anger of a man who had never once had to develop patience because the world had always eventually arranged itself according to his preference. You manipulated the process, he said. You hid your identity. That's fraud. It's not fraud, Dad. I kept my voice level. Every transaction was conducted under Everest Holdings, a registered legal entity. The fact that I am Everest Holdings founder and CEO is publicly available information. No one asked. Your own lawyers signed off? He was looking at me the way people look at something they thought they understood and have suddenly discovered they don't. Nathan Pell handled the M&A structure, 12 years in corporate acquisitions, formerly Goldman Sachs. He reviewed every transaction for legal compliance at each stage. I paused. You're welcome to have your legal team review the documentation. They won't find anything to contest. Garrett, who had been red-faced and sputtering since the moment I mentioned due diligence, chose this moment to lean across the table. You went through our financials, he said. That is absolutely corporate espionage. It's standard acquisition due diligence, Garrett. I looked at him directly. Every company that considers acquiring another reviews that company's financial records. It's not only legal, it's required. A beat. The vendor irregularities that appeared in the financial review, I said, my voice careful and precise, have been documented and referred to our legal team. Exhibit F in the due diligence file. $300,000 routed through 3 shell accounts across 31 months. His face went the specific white of a man who has been doing something he knew was wrong and has suddenly discovered someone knows. Those are legitimate vendor accounts. Vendor accounts registered to LLCs with no operational history, no employees, and billing addresses that resolve to a UPS store in Newton, Massachusetts. I watched him. Our forensic accounting was conducted by Claire Whitfield, partner at Whitfield & Associates, 23 years in financial investigation. The documentation is complete. My father turned slowly and looked at his son. Garrett's mouth was moving without producing sound. That moment, that specific silent moment, was the one I had not planned for. I had planned the acquisition. I had planned the Thanksgiving timing. I had planned the business card and the precise language of the boardroom confrontation and the press release going out the next morning. I had not planned for the feeling of watching my father look at Garrett with the beginning of an understanding he was not ready to have. My father is many things. He is dismissive, he is stubborn, he is constitutionally incapable of believing that a woman could build something he hadn't sanctioned. He has flaws that cost me years of my life and one art school scholarship I had earned on my own, and a boardroom presentation I had worked on for 4 months. But he built a company, and someone he trusted had been stealing from it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second envelope. This one I set in front of my father. This is separate from the acquisition, I said. This is the documentation of the vendor irregularities, compiled independently and held outside the acquisition process. What you do with it is your decision. He looked at the envelope, then at Garrett, then back at me. The acquisition stands, I said. The press release goes tomorrow at 9. But what happens to the company, what we build with it, that's something I'd like to discuss with you. Not tonight. When things are less, I gestured at the room, the overturned gravy boat, Megan still somehow live streaming through her tears. When things are less what they currently are, I stood. I picked up my coat. I'm not here to destroy Adam's software, Dad. I'm here because I know how to save it, and because I've known how to save it since I was 22 years old, and because the only thing I ever wanted was for someone in this family to take that seriously. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. My father looked at me across 30 years of that mahogany table, and for the first time in my life, for the very first time, he had nothing to say. I walked out. The press release went out at 9:04 a.m. the following Friday. Everest Holdings completes acquisition of Adam's software in 50 Mulliner transaction. CEO Emmy Stone, revealed to be Morgan Elizabeth Adams, daughter of founder Richard Adams, to lead integration. The tech press had a predictable reaction. TechCrunch ran it as their lead story. Axios picked it up within the hour. By noon, the story was on Bloomberg, framed as a decade-long stealth strategy, and the most remarkable corporate reveal of the year. My phone produced 847 notifications in the first 6 hours. I turned it face down and made coffee. Nathan called at 9:30 a.m. The integration team is ready when you are. Legal wants a call Monday to go over the Garrett situation. Schedule it, I said. The Garrett situation resolved itself faster than I expected. Claire Whitfield's documentation was, as she had described it to me 3 weeks earlier, comprehensive to the point of redundancy. Garrett retained an attorney, a man named Philip Morton, 16 years of white-collar defense practice in Boston, who reviewed the evidence file and apparently advised his client in very clear terms about the likely trajectory of contesting it. Garrett repaid $300,000 in a structured settlement negotiated over 6 weeks. He resigned from the board. He did not face criminal charges. which was a decision I made not out of generosity, but out of the pragmatic calculation that a criminal proceeding against my brother would consume years of my attention and produce a result that the settlement already achieved. The criminal investigation was a different matter. Detective Susan Mara, Financial Crimes Unit, Suffolk County, 8 years in corporate fraud investigation, had been alerted to the vendor account irregularities as a routine referral from Claire's office. She reviewed the file. She made a determination that the settlement and full repayment, combined with Garrett's cooperation in documenting the mechanism of the fraud, was sufficient for her office's purposes. Garrett moved to Phoenix in February. He has a job in sales. I genuinely hope it's going better than his other endeavors. The integration of Adam's software into the Everest Holdings operational framework took 14 months. It was, as integrations go, complicated. The legacy infrastructure was worse than our due diligence had suggested. The development team was smaller and more demoralized than the staffing reports indicated. And there were 3 enterprise clients who needed significant relationship management before they stopped considering migration to competitors. I handled 2 of the 3 client relationships personally. Long calls, detailed presentations, a transparency about what had happened and what we were building that I think most of those clients hadn't experienced from Adams Software's leadership in years. We retained all 3. The Adams Software development team, 22 people who had spent years working under an innovation-averse leadership structure and were, as it turned out, considerably more talented than their output had been allowed to demonstrate, responded to the integration with the specific energy of people who have been given permission to do things correctly for the first time. Within 8 months, they had shipped 2 major platform updates. My father and I had our conversation, not the week after Thanksgiving, the month after. He called me on a Saturday morning, which was unusual. My father has always considered Saturday mornings his own private domain, reserved for golf and the specific variety of solitude that men of his generation consider a non-negotiable right. "I've been thinking," he said, which was his version of "I was wrong," as close as he was going to get, possibly as close as he had ever gotten about anything. "I know," I said. "The platform you presented in 2012, was it? Did it become—" "Yes," I said. "That's what Everest is built on." A long pause. "I want to understand what you've built," he said, "if you're willing to explain it." I was on the next flight to Boston. We sat in his study for 4 hours. I walked him through the architecture, the integration methodology, the 10-year development arc. He listened in a way he had never listened when I was 22, with the focused, uncomfortable attention of a man who is processing the specific cost of not having listened the first time. It was not a reconciliation exactly. It was something more complicated and more honest than reconciliation. 2 people acknowledging the same reality from different positions within it. He asked at the end whether I'd considered keeping the Adams name on the integrated company. I thought about it for a moment. "Adams Everest," I said, "for the enterprise division." He looked at the window, then back at me. "Your grandfather would have liked that," he said. I think that was the closest he had to an apology. I decided it was enough. I'm writing this from the Boston office, which used to be my father's boardroom and which I have renovated completely. The old boy mahogany is gone, replaced by glass and standing desks and a collaboration space that actually functions as a place where people collaborate rather than a stage for senior management to perform authority. The business is doing well. Better than well, actually. The Adams integration gave us enterprise relationships and regional infrastructure that we'd have spent 3 years building organically. The combined entity is on track for a valuation north of $500 million by end of year. The press still calls me Emmy Stone sometimes. I don't correct it. Emmy Stone built Everest Holdings. Morgan Adams is the person who is figuring out what to do with it. Those 2 people are the same person, but the distinction matters to me privately, in ways I don't entirely need to explain to TechCrunch. I think about that boardroom presentation sometimes, the slides I built, the data I had vetted by Professor Lehman at MIT, the 4 months of work I carried into a room full of men who laughed at it. I don't think about it with anger. I thought about it with anger for a long time, and anger is a reasonable fuel for certain distances, but it's not what you want to be running on when you arrive. What I think about it now is closer to gratitude, not for the dismissal. I will never be grateful for that, but for what the dismissal revealed, which was a very clear picture of the specific work that needed to be done and the specific person who was going to have to do it. Me, alone, on my own terms. With a secondhand desk and a good monitor and $5,000 and the absolute, unshakable knowledge that the platform worked. It worked. I knew it then. I know it now. The table at the boardroom used to belong to my father. Now it belongs to me. And everyone who sits at it knows exactly who built it.